The fork, a simple object we use every single day, almost without thinking. But behind this familiar tool lies a surprisingly dramatic, controversial, and even forbidden history. Today, we're traveling back nearly 1,000 years to uncover the strange and unexpected story of how the fork became one of humanity's most essential dining inventions. Our journey begins in the glittering world of the Byzantine Empire. Imagine enormous banquets filled with gold, silk, precious stones, and music echoing through marble halls. And there, among all the treasures, sat one object that shocked visitors more than anything else. Not a crown, not a jewel, but a small golden fork. In the 11th century, a Byzantine princess named Theodora Ducas married into Venetian royalty. She brought with her a luxurious lifestyle, refined manners, and something the Italians had never seen: a tiny, two-pronged gold fork used to pick up food without ever touching it by hand. The guests stared in disbelief. The clergy were horrified. To them, eating with a fork was not elegance, it was arrogance. One monk wrote that using such a device was an insult to God, because God had already given humans perfectly good natural forks, their fingers. And so, believe it or not, the fork was condemned as a sinful object. Some priests called it a blasphemous vanity. Others said it encouraged excessive cleanliness, which was considered suspicious at the time. After the princess died young, her death was even blamed on her wicked use of the fork. The message was clear: the fork was not welcome in Europe. For several centuries, the fork remained rare, strange, and even feared. Most Europeans continued to eat with knives, spoons, or simply their hands. Even kings avoided the fork. In the Middle Ages, sharing a knife at the table was normal and often expected. A personal set of cutlery was a sign of pride, but a fork? That was going too far. But change was coming. Slowly, the Italian elite began to adopt forks, especially during the Renaissance. Pasta dishes were spreading, and eating long, slippery noodles neatly was almost impossible without a fork. Italy became the first European region where forks were not only accepted but admired. From Italy, the fork traveled to France. And this is where our story becomes even more colorful. When Catherine de' Medici married the future King Henry II of France in the 16th century, she carried with her an entire cultural revolution. She brought new foods, new table manners, and of course, forks. French nobles were fascinated. For them, the fork became a symbol of class, precision, and sophistication. Slowly, the idea spread across Europe. Eating without touching your food was elegant. But not everyone agreed. When English travelers saw French aristocrats eating with forks, they mocked them. The famous English writer Thomas Coriat was ridiculed for using a fork after returning from Italy. People called him furcifer, meaning fork-bearer, and even made jokes that using a fork made him weak. The English believed that real men used their hands. It wasn't until the 18th century that the fork finally won the battle in Britain. The reason? Hygiene and fashion. Powdered wigs, elaborate clothing, and delicate fabrics made eating with hands inconvenient. Gradually, the fork moved from suspicious luxury to everyday necessity. But now the fork faced a new challenge: evolution. Early forks had only two prongs. They were good for stabbing food, but terrible for scooping or twirling. As new dishes appeared, so did new fork styles. By the 18th century, three-pronged forks emerged. Then came four-pronged designs, which balanced food perfectly and soon became the global standard. The Industrial Revolution accelerated everything. Machines allowed cutlery to be produced cheaply and in massive quantities. Suddenly, owning a personal set of knives, spoons, and forks was normal, not just for the wealthy, but for ordinary families. At last, after nearly 1,000 years of resistance, the fork took its rightful place at the table. But our story doesn't end here. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the fork transformed again, this time into a symbol of etiquette. New rules dictated how to hold it, which hand to use, when to switch positions, and even how loudly one could place it on a plate. In England and much of Europe, the fork remained in the left hand. In the United States, a new dining style developed: the zigzag method. Cut with the fork in the left hand, then switch it to the right to eat. Each style became a cultural signature. And then came the age of specialization. Oyster forks, salad forks, dessert forks, pastry forks, fish forks, even pickle forks. At one point, Victorian households might own more than a dozen types of forks, each with a specific purpose. Some were tiny, some wide, some curved. Each design reflected a growing obsession with precision and formality. But despite all these variations, the classic four-pronged dinner fork remains the champion of everyday use. Its design hasn't changed significantly in almost 250 years because, quite simply, it works. Today, the fork is so universal that it's easy to forget not everyone embraced it. In many parts of Asia, chopsticks remain the traditional utensil of choice. In some cultures, eating by hand is still a respected and meaningful practice. The fork is not superior. It's simply one tool among many, shaped by centuries of culture, religion, and habit. Yet its history gives us a lesson. Even the most ordinary objects can have extraordinary stories. The fork survived religious condemnation, social ridicule, and centuries of suspicion. It traveled across empires, challenged traditions, and eventually reshaped how billions of people eat. So next time you pick up a fork, whether it's stainless steel, silver, bamboo, or plastic, remember that you are holding an invention that took nearly a millennium to earn its place at the table. An invention once banned, mocked, feared, and even blamed for a princess's death. An invention that quietly changed human dining forever. The story of the fork is a story of resistance, culture, refinement, and evolution. A small tool with a big history. And like many great inventions, it reminds us that even the simplest things around us often hide the most remarkable journeys. If you enjoyed this journey, consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories behind the everyday objects around us. Thank you for watching.